"Don't touch the floorboards," the old auctioneer whispered, not to Jonas Beck but to the pine-dark room itself, before he slammed the gavel and sold the cabin for 10 cents. Jonas didn't laugh. He didn't have laughter left in him. The gavel's crack bled into the hush of the forest, wind threading needles through long-leaf pines, a hawk peeling the sky, a distant creek chewing old stones. The cabin stood on stacked stones, starved of paint, lidless windows blinking at nothing. One room, a lean-to out back, roof bowed like a tired back. And yet, when Jonas stepped inside, something in the floor seemed to inhale. It wasn't sound, more like a pressure in the ears, a sense of a held breath. The boards were dish gray and slick with a century of damp, but in the middle of the room a neat rectangle shone faintly different, as if the wood there had learned to lie. When Jonas pressed his boot heel to it, the air went colder. He pulled back. The dog at his calf, Copper, liver and white and all ribs, stiffened, then sat, eyes locked on that rectangle the way a dog watches a rabbit hole it knows is not empty. Outside, the auction crowd had already scattered, trucks coughing to life. Jonas's name, his father's name, had been murmured with the small-town pity folks save for those trying not to drown. A foreclosed combine, a late loan, a wife's photograph turned face down on the dresser because it still hurt to look. 10 cents felt like a dare from fate. He crouched, ran a fingertip along a hairline seam. Dust, cold and sweet like old paper, rode the air. The seam made a perfect hinge around that rectangle, cut by a hand that measured twice, cut once, and kept its secrets. Jonas glanced to the doorway. No one. The forest stood, waiting. In the corner, a pot-bellied stove listed like a drunken sentinel. A broken chair faced the window as though expecting company that never came. He pressed again and felt the tiniest give. Wood sighed. Not yet. The whisper wasn't his. It wasn't human. It felt like words spoken by a room that remembered. Copper whined low, tail tucked. Jonas rose too fast, knocking dust from rafters. He forced a breath deep enough to burn. "We just bought a cabin," he told the dog, voice steadying on the shape of the lie, "and a floor that talks." Beyond the doorway, clouds stacked like storm-bent hay. Pine sap scented the air with lemon and iron. His phone had no bars. The world had shrunk to wood, breath, the tender click of a latch somewhere beneath his boots, and a question that caught in his throat like a fishbone. Who would hide a door in a place this lonely, and what were they afraid would come looking? Jonas Beck wasn't a man given to whims. His life was a ledger of days. Pre-dawn coffee, a tractor from the 70s that coughed to life on prayer and carb cleaner, a field that had been his father's and his father's before, soil thin as old cloth but loyal if you treated it gentle. After Elena passed, the house became a museum of a life paused mid-sentence. He talked less, worked more, ate when the sun told him to, slept only when exhaustion took him by the collar and dragged him under. Debt is quiet until it isn't. The bank officer had shoulders like a cupboard and a smile that thawed nothing. "You've got options, Mr. Beck," he'd said, sliding printouts across a desk that smelled like lemon oil. "Sell the back parcel. Take a partner. Restructure." All the verbs meant the same thing: let go. So when a notice went up about a county surplus auction, miscellaneous timber, scrap, structures marked unsafe, Jonas drove out of nothing more than a wish to feel the wind through the window for a while. He hadn't planned to raise his hand. 10 cents had raised itself. Maybe you know that impulse. The one that says, "If I don't try, I'll never know what could have broken me or saved me." If you do, be sure to subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know your towns, your fields, your cities, and night shift kitchens and quiet apartments. Because stories like this aren't about old wood and hidden doors. They're about people who stand in the doorway of something strange and step forward anyway. Jonas had nearly nothing left to lose. The cabin, squatting a few miles into a wedge of county forest, came with a scrap of paper and a key that fit nothing. The paper named it Parcel 44B, unoccupied since 1919. A century is a long time for a place to keep its mouth shut. As the sun laid knife-blade rays through the pines, Jonas parked his truck, cut the engine, and let silence rush in like water. He brought a pry bar, a lantern, 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, and the patience of a man who had learned to move carefully around grief. Copper hopped down, shook herself, and trotted ahead, nails ticking on the porch boards. The cabin's door moved grudgingly, releasing a breath that smelled of iron, ash, and winter hands. The floor waited. Maybe you can smell it too, right there where you are. A tang like wet coins and stove soot. Picture the dust motes floating where the light breaks through. The hush so deep you can hear wood tick as it cools. If you're with me, tap that like, subscribe for the next story, and drop a hello. Because what came next drew a line through Jonas's life, before and after, and pushed him to a choice that would cost him blood. He set the lantern on the stove and coaxed a flame to life. Yellow breathed warmth into corners. The cabin's skeleton revealed itself. Hand-hewn studs, cross-bracing at odd, careful angles. A shelf of bottles furred white with the crystals of evaporated time. In the light, the rectangle in the floor didn't just shine different. It drank light, like old oil, like a pupil widening in the dark to catch more of you. Jonas knelt, placed his palm flat to the wood. Cold rose through his skin. He felt, impossibly, a pulse. Not rhythmic, not human, more like a distant engine through rails. A vibration that told him there was space beneath. He worked the pry bar's beak into the seam. The wood resisted, then relented with a sound like a held breath released. Board by board, the rectangle lifted free. Under it lay a box, flush with the joists. Not a trunk, not a simple cache. A built thing, iron-banded, tarred at the seams. A padlock hunched like a black beetle where a hasp peeked through layers of pitch. The key he'd been given, ridiculous for modern locks, looked at home here. His hand shook once and steadied. He slid the key in. It turned as if it had been waiting. The lid didn't open. Instead, a chain of faint clicks moved away from him across the floor, under the boards, through the joists, toward the east wall. Copper lifted her head, ears pricked, then let out a soft woof that said she too heard something running. Jonas stood fast. The east wall was clean pine, tongue and groove tight. He ran his fingers along it, found nothing, then caught a whisper of draft at ankle height. He lay flat, pressing his ear to the floor. The clicks receded, then stopped. Silence returned, not empty, but charged. He thumped the floor beside the box. Hollow. He thumped the east wall. Hollow lower, solid above. A space, a crawl, or a chute. The lantern flame blinked, guttered, steadied. The air cooled another notch. He worked the box lid again. This time it lifted a finger's width and stalled. Tar tore like old cloth. A thread of scent escaped. Cedar, camphor, a medicinal sweetness that made his eyes sting. He pushed. The lid gave with a wet suck. Inside lay wrapped bundles, hand-sized, cocooned in oilcloth. On top, an envelope in crackled cream bore a name in blue-black ink. Ashford. Not his. He'd never heard it. He looked around the empty room, as if the person addressed might step in, fashionably a century late, to receive their mail. He slid a thumb under the wax seal, lifted. Letters slept inside, their edges browned like pie crust. The first read, "If you're reading this, the lever under the stove has already done its work. Forgive the theatrics. A man doesn't live long by trusting strangers, and I have made too many enemies to pretend safety now. The thing itself is not in the box. Not entirely. You'll need the wall." The lantern flared taller as if it had drawn breath to listen. Jonas moved to the stove, crouched. Soot had filmed everything, but at the back left foot he found a bracket notched into the floor. His fingertips found a metal tongue slick with old grease. He pulled. Somewhere inside the wall, a weight fell. The east panels shifted a hair, enough to show a seam that hadn't been visible until the cabin itself exhaled. Copper whined again, and this time Jonas shushed her without thinking, the way a man does when he's halfway across a river and the current tugs. He set his shoulder to the seam and pushed. Board slid, reluctant but obedient, revealing a crawl space no higher than his thigh. Cold air spilled out, ripe with the scent of stone and old iron. At the back of the space, something waited. A second box, longer, embedded in the foundation, and on its face a metal wheel no larger than a saucer, etched with numbers. A safe, built into the bones of the cabin. Its paint had gone to ash. Its dial ticked when he brushed it, faint and sure as a heartbeat. Jonas had never cracked a safe, but he understood how things remember. Cattle gates that swing smoother if you treat them gentle. Old tractors that start only if you don't force the choke. He leaned close, ear to the steel, and turned the wheel. Somewhere far away, a bird called. The dial's tick clicked under his skin. 32. Back past 20. Stop at 7. Again. On the second rotation, the cabin made that held breath sound once more. He felt it, not heard it. The deep down shift of a bolt in a slot. He stopped. Because all at once, the forest quiet went wrong. A truck engine on a road that ended at his tires. A door slam. Boots on pine needles. Voices. Men's voices. One, dry and patient, like gravel rolling in a jar. He knew by reputation, not by acquaintance. Vincent Thorne. Timber buyer, tax line collector. Finder of opportunities in other men's bad luck. The kind of man the bank officer called solution-oriented. The kind of man who didn't come to the woods without a reason. Pressure from outside had found him. Jonas slid the wall panel back into place. The click was too loud in the charged air. He kicked the floorboard cover almost into place, then stopped it an inch shy. Better to look like a repair than a secret. He shoved the letters into his jacket, shoved the jacket under the stove. The lantern went down to a polite thread of flame. Copper pressed against his shin, vibrating. Quiet, he breathed, and she obeyed because obedience is just a different word for faith. Knuckles on the door. Not a request. A statement. Mr. Beck, the gravel voice called. Heard you bought yourself some kindling. Jonas opened the door halfway. Vincent Thorne filled the porch with a smile like a chalk mark across slate. A second man flanked him. Dalton Reeves, who ran a crew that cleared right-of-ways and didn't mind where the line fell so long as the check cashed. Both wore vests with too many pockets. Both smelled of cologne crushed under sweat and gasoline. Afternoon, Jonas said. Barely, Thorne said. Day's getting away. What do you need? What a man always needs. Information. I tend to know what I need to know, but occasionally I like to be surprised. He leaned to peer past Jonas, eyes running over the cabin. Say that floor got a sink in the middle? How do you like that? Built-in pool. Jonas didn't bite. It's uneven. Thorne stepped forward without being invited. Jonas didn't step back, and the moment hung between them like wire. Thorne's smile sharpened. Congratulations on your purchase. County likes to see these old structures gone before some kid comes out here and puts an eye out. Figured I'd offer to help you expedite. I don't plan to tear it down. Not much planning left in this county, is there? Clouds up there look like they're fixing to decide for us all. Thorne's eyes dropped to the near-invisible seam around the floor rectangle. He didn't look long. He didn't have to. Dalton's gaze snagged on the same place. Men who take things learn to recognize the shape of a hiding place. Tell you what, I've got a crew close. We could take this down, haul the good timber, smooth the site. Might find some old iron. We split whatever we find. I already split with the county, Jonas said. Thorne studied him. You don't strike me as a man with time to waste. Nor money. Both true. Jonas met the man's gaze and let silence do a little work. Still not selling. Dalton shifted, eyes sliding to the window, to the stove, to the wall. He sniffed. Smells like camphor. I lit the lantern, Jonas said. Must be the oil. Thorne's smile smoothed. I admire stubbornness, Mr. Beck. It's the last religion that pays dividends. But here's the thing. There's something under old places. Sometimes it's rats. Sometimes it's mold. Sometimes it's deeds people forgot to file and promises that didn't make it to paper. You strike me as a man who could use a good promise. What are you really here for? Well, Thorne's attention landed on copper. It softened by a degree. You've got a good dog. Dog like that's wasted in a place that leaks. He shifted, let the porch board complain under his boot and brought his gaze back up. I'm here to save you some time. He turned as if to go, then paused, exactly where the porch rail is weakest. The wood bowed, squeaked. On his way down the steps, he kept talking. You know the Ashfords? Jonas controlled his face the way you learn to control your hands around a skittish colt. No. Huh. They knew this cabin. Fella named Silas Ashford put it up. Had himself a reputation for building things strong and hiding things stronger. Thorne's smile cut wider. If you come across anything belongs to them, I'd be real grateful to take it off your hands. Clear up any encumbrances. Encumbrances? Jonas asked. Liens, Dalton said blandly, almost kindly. Claims. Paper that says you got a thing you think is yours but it ain't. He tapped his chest pocket. We're good at paper. You look like a man who would rather fix machines than read. Thorne tipped a finger off his temple as if he wore a hat. We'll be around. They left. The truck's engine slid into the trees and dwindled. Jonas stood in the doorway until the wind regained its courage. Then he closed the door careful and went to his knees. Breath of tightness. He pulled the letters from under the stove and sat on the floor with his back to the door. He read by lantern. Silas Ashford wrote like a man who saw the bones in things. The letters were dated late autumn 1918 through early 1919, most addressed to a sister he never named, some to himself. They spoke in layers, as if aware prying eyes might read, yet needing to tell someone. The motor is quiet when the magnets sit right. Keep that in your head, Silas, always the alignment. They want it for light, I want it for the river. If I don't come back, the combination is the year we were the same age. You'd laugh at that. I hear boots. Jonas set one letter aside, hands unsteady. He found another sealed packet beneath the stack. Inside, a photograph, sepia and stiff, showed a man in suspenders beside a shape covered in canvas. The cabin's wall was the backdrop. You could tell it by the knot in the third board. In the picture, the knot looked like an eye. He went to the safe with the photograph in his head. The year we were the same age. 2 children in an old photograph appeared in his mind. His mother had a similar picture with a scribble on the back. We caught each other at 9, but this wasn't his family. He needed Silas's year. He rifled the letters again, found a date, found a mention, turned 34 with frost on the sill. Another letter mentioned the sister turning 29 the same winter, 34 and 29. Same age only if you flipped the tens? No. Silas wrote the year we were the same age could mean 1900, when people joked that the century had reset the count for everyone. Or it could be a code only an Ashford would get. He closed his eyes and listened. The dial whispered to his fingertips. He tried 1919. Nothing. 1900. On the third number, a bolt thumped home. The safe's door didn't open. The wall did. A seam sprang along the east wall chest high, panels yawning like a mouth. Behind them lay a chamber lined in tin. Cold flowed out. Mounted in the tin like a saint's reliquary sat a machine no larger than a butter churn. Polished brass, coils wound with cloth-insulated wire, a hand-cranked flywheel, and at its heart, a crystal the color of rainwater lit from within by a docile blue. The thing hummed so faintly it made Jonas's teeth ache. A note wired to the crank said, "Do not run dry. Grease bearings. Align magnets first." There were also 2 canvas-wrapped bundles marked with stencil, patterns and deeds. He touched the brass. It was warm. Boots again. Not outside. On the porch. The door latch plinked. Thorne didn't knock this time. The door blew open hard enough to bang the stovepipe. Copper sprang up, hackles a ridge. Dalton came in first, shoulders set to block. Thorne followed, one hand raised, palm out like a clerk asking for quiet in a library. "Easy," Thorne said. "We're done playing polite." Jonas stood between them and the open wall. The machine's blue pulse washed faintly over his back. "You don't have a warrant." Thorne laughed in a small, private way. "I've got something friendlier." He produced papers like a conjurer produces doves. "This parcel's title has complexities. Turns out the county's auction conveyed improvements, not subsurface rights. See here? Rights to fixtures and inventions remain with the estate of Silas Ashford," Dalton said, bored. "Now how would you know that?" Jonas asked, buying time. Dalton shrugged. "We talk to people, people talk to us." "You talk to graves?" Jonas said, heat rising. "Silas has been dead 100 years. Thorne's eyes flicked past Jonas, just once, to the open seam. He didn't press. He didn't have to. "I don't intend to leave here without what I came for." Copper growled, a low electric sound that vibrated the room. Thorne glanced at her and took one neat step sideways out of lunge line. He'd studied dogs. He'd studied men. "Mr. Beck, you can take a finder's fee and a load off your troubles, or you can make this theatrical. Your auctioneer warned me about floorboards," Jonas said. "I figured theatrics were already baked in." Thorne's smile held, but a muscle hopped in his jaw. He nodded to Dalton. Dalton moved and Jonas moved with him. Years of farm work teach balance. He's a man who knows where weight lives in a room. Dalton grabbed. Jonas pivoted. The papers flew. Copper launched and snapped, teeth gritting on Dalton's sleeve. Dalton cursed, drew back, and drove a knee into the dog's ribs to break the bite. Copper yelped, airless. Jonas saw red. He shoved Dalton hard enough to send him into the stove. The lantern tumbled. Flame leapt and then guttered on cold iron. Thorne didn't flinch. He stepped around the scuffle toward the wall, attention narrowing like a blade. "Don't," Jonas said. Thorne reached for the machine. His fingers brushed the crystal. The hum deepened. An organ note too low for ears felt in bones. The blue quickened. not angry but alert. Thorne snatched his hand back, startled. "What is it?" "Light," Jonas said, "because the truth is often the best lie." "Power," Thorne recovered. "You don't know what you have. I know enough. Enough to be dangerous," Thorne said softly, almost admiring. "Silas tried to sell this to the War Department. Did you know that? Promised a generator the size of a stove that could pull power from the river air. He vanished instead. People vanish when they forget who owns the paper." He gestured at the bundles. "Patterns. Deeds. That's what I came for. You don't own this. That's the beauty," Thorne said, tongue sweetening on the words. "Ownership is what paper says it is." Dalton pushed off the stove, wind wheezing, face like a bruised peach. "Dog'll get one in the head if she tries me again." "Try her and I'll—" Jonas began and stopped, because the machine's hum had found a tooth in the room, a resonance. The floorboards trembled, just enough to make the lantern's shadow wag on the wall. The note on the crank had said, "Do not run dry," but the crystal was lit. The cabin was a tuned box. The magnets, where were they? The letters. Align the magnets. The brackets under the stove. The iron bands in the floor box. The numbers on the safe dial. Buckets, pulleys, plates embedded where a man with Silas's mind could make every surface sing the same note. Jonas put his hand on the crank and felt the machine's weight. He could turn it and change the hum, or he could let it build to something greater. He made a choice that belonged to the same stubbornness that had raised his hand at an auction. He turned the crank 1/4, slow. The hum climbed into the audible range, like bees in jars. The floor throbbed once, twice. Copper backed to Jonas's heel, eyes on his face, trusting him to do the right foolish thing. Dalton swore. "Shut it off." Thorne stepped in, and Jonas stepped aside not to yield, but to redirect. He shoved the man's shoulder and spun him into the path of the opening wall seam. The panel, unset by the vibration, slid another inch. Thorne's weight carried him sideways into the crawl. He caught himself on the tin lip, cursed, and looked up in time to see Jonas plant his hand on the crank again. "Don't be an idiot," Thorne said, voice flat now, the patience burned away. "You'll bring the roof down." "You said you were here to save me time," Jonas said. "Let's hurry." He turned the crank a fraction farther. The cabin groaned like a ship. A seam at the ceiling popped, dust sifting down in a soft brown rain. From beneath the floor came a shiver of moving iron, of weights shifting along tracks, of a century-old system coming full awake. Hidden bolts set. A counterweight fell. Somewhere a lever tripped. The door swung shut on its own momentum and the latch bit cleanly. Dalton lunged. Copper met him with a snarl that froze him half-step. Jonas grabbed the canvas bundle marked Deeds, tucked it under his arm, and yanked the other, patterns free. The machine thrummed, the crystal brightening until it threw pale daylight along the ceiling. In that light, Thorne's face looked carved thin, eyes glittering. "You'll regret this," Thorne said. "I don't lose." "Then you haven't fought the right things," Jonas said. He yanked the crank back to neutral. The hum eased, as if a creature had settled on its haunches. He pulled the stove lever with his free hand. The wall began to slide shut. Thorne surged. Jonas kicked the tin lip. Thorne's fingers slipped. The panel kissed his knuckles on its way past. He snatched his hand free with a hiss. The seam clicked home. The machine's light vanished into the wall's breath. In the sudden dim, Dalton swung wild. The blow caught Jonas across the cheekbone, white light flaring behind his eyes. Copper caught fabric again, bone-deep growl shaking her shoulders. Dalton stumbled and fell, tangling with the dog. Thorne raised his elbow, came in low, not for a punch, but for Jonas's throat. Jonas ducked, took the elbow on his shoulder, and answered with a farmer's lesson. Leverage. He drove Thorne into the stove so hard the pipe clanged like a bell. The lantern flame, abused beyond patience, went out and left the room in a smoky blue from the machine's faint leak through the wall. "Out," Jonas said to Copper. She released Dalton and darted through the door like a shot. Jonas followed, bundles under his arm, cheek ringing. He hit the porch, clearing the steps in one jump, and sprinted for the truck with the panic of a man who has something to lose again. The forest took his noise and threw it deeper. Thorne cursed behind him. A gun barked, a single round that slapped a pine trunk and sugared bark down like sleet. Jonas tore the truck's door open. The key. Where? There. He turned it. The old engine stuttered, coughed, and found itself. Copper leapt through the passenger side. Jonas threw the stick into reverse, slammed the pedal, and felt the tires bite sand. The truck lurched. Another shot cracked. The side mirror atomized. "Sorry," Jonas told the truck and asked for more. It gave it. He fishtailed, found the rutted track, and hit it, trees stitching past. In the rear view, the cabin crouched, a dark thought. A figure, Thorne, charged onto the porch, blurred by distance and a quiver in Jonas's vision. Dalton followed, limping. They looked small suddenly. The forest looked large. He didn't stop until the track hit County Road. He didn't breathe properly until the cabin was 2 bends behind him, and the world remembered how to be wider than one room. He drove straight to the place where you go when paper is the battlefield and you don't own a sword. Clara Ashford's law office above the feed store. Clara Ashford, granddaughter of Silas's nameless sister, wore her hair in a bun that meant business and boots that meant she didn't mind climbing a fence. She listened without interrupting, the way water listens when you pour it into a clean glass. When Jonas set the deeds bundle on her desk and peeled back canvas, her eyes sharpened the way a hawk's does when a field moves wrong. "They're real," she said, fingers light on the brittle paper. Filed, stamped, witnessed. Silas was thorough. He conveyed certain rights to his sister before She didn't finish the sentence. Some endings didn't need sound. He protected what he made by making it hers. "And Jonas began. "Next of kin in the only line that counts for this." She smiled. Not soft, but right. "Vincent Thorne's paperwork won't stand up in front of a judge with this on the table. He's good at finding gaps. Silas filled these with cement. Thorne won't go away," Jonas said. "He'll try the other door. Then we shut it with the law." She tapped the stack. "We file an injunction. We put a lock on that cabin that can't be picked, and we bring the sheriff into it, since he still believes in math. Sheriff Morrison did." Thorne's bluster folded into polite compliance when confronted with signatures a century old and a deputy who liked dogs. Dalton took the brunt of the lecture about trespassing, which he accepted with the gravelly dignity of men who consider lectures cheaper than fines. Judge Patricia Stone, a woman with a memory like the county's bedrock, signed a temporary restraining order so fast the ink looked hot. Paper fought paper. For once, it favored the right hands. Clara stood with Jonas on the cabin's porch 3 days later. The forest miled again in late light. The wall was shut. The floor wore its honest face. The machine hummed to itself in the bone of the place. Copper slept in a patch of sun, one paw twitching at something glorious in dog dream. "You know what you've got?" Clara asked. "A secret that wants to be useful," Jonas said. He'd spent the nights between reading Silas's patterns, tracing lines with a mechanic's finger, understanding the way the river's damp could be teased into current, how a magnet's sigh could become a lamp's glow. He had seen how a small light in a dark place could be enough. Clara nodded. Silas built a thing to keep a town alive when the grid failed. He believed in small power, local power. It got him in trouble. She studied Jonas's face. "What will you do with it?" "Pay the bank," he said, then smiled at how small that sounded beside a humming heart. "And after? Keep it here. Make it earn its keep. Light the greenhouse. Run the pump. Maybe the neighbors' freezers when storms lay the lines down. Nothing big. Just, enough. Vincent Thorne will come back in a better suit. Then we'll meet him with better paper." He touched the doorframe, feeling the cabin thrum faintly through wood. "I thought I was buying a mistake for a dime. Turns out I bought a promise." Clara looked at the trees. "My granddad used to say, what you bury isn't the same as what you plant. The first is gone. The second is waiting." Jonas thought of Elena, her laughter in the kitchen when the radio played something old, her hand in his on the porch swing when the heat broke. Grief had been a hole he walked around for years. Now it felt, not full, but bordered. He could plant there. He could choose what rose. A month later, the bank officer came out to the farm with a new smile that thawed a little. "Mr. Beck," he said, "about that restructuring." "No need," Jonas answered, sliding a certified check across the hood of his truck. The officer blinked, like a man stepping out of a movie into noon. Jonas did not explain generators or crystals or a 100-year-old mind that had reached forward to hand him a tool. He kept the story where it worked best, behind wood, behind law, behind the careful trust of a few good people. Vincent Thorne did return, with counsel and a posture of injured civility. He met the court's patience and Clara's preparation. The law held. The judge ruled that fixtures and inventions conveyed to the Ashford line stood, and that Jonas operated under a lease recognized by that estate. Thorne left with less than he'd brought. an argument that had sounded good until it met facts. Dalton, months later at the feed store, scratched Copper behind the ears while Jonas paid for alfalfa. "No hard feelings," he said. "Maybe to the dog, maybe to the man. Boss forgets sometimes the difference between finding and taking." "Easy to confuse," Jonas said. "Harder to live with," Dalton replied, and looked like a man who'd learned something the complicated way. On the first night the machine lit the greenhouse, the tomatoes glowed like small suns behind glass. The hum wrapped the winter in a kind of kindness. Snow piled on the cabin roof with a hush like wool. Jonas sat on the porch steps with Copper warm against his thigh and watched frost silver the world. In the wall, the safe chuffed its small satisfaction. The letters, preserved now in a flat archival box, rested on Clara's desk, where future hands could read them and understand how stubbornness, properly aligned, isn't a flaw, but a power. If you've walked with Jonas this far, you know what the story was really about. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't the man who wanted paper to eat people's lives. It was a question asked under the breath. When the floor whispers not yet, do you listen? Or do you find the lever and make the wall move? Jonas moved it. He paid what that cost. He got back more than money. If you want more stories like this, about quiet people in loud moments, about doors in ordinary rooms and the courage to open them, watch the next video that just popped up here on the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next hidden hinge, and tell me where you're watching from. I'll be reading. Because sometimes what you bury is gone, and sometimes, if you're stubborn and kind and just foolish enough, what you bury waits 100 years to change your life.